relationships really matter. So build them with authenticity and curiosity. It's not transactional. Make sure you give as much as you take.
Welcome to That Pivotal Moment of Change, the podcast where we dive into the career-defining moments that shape who we become. Success, setbacks, big decisions, we unpack it all. Let's get into it. On today's episode, we're speaking with Kevin Hawkins.
Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here today, and I am very much looking forward to our conversation.
Same.
I'm going to get this rolling here, and can you talk about your background and how you got into design and research?
Yeah, certainly. The long story short is I come from a very international mixed family that are all into entrepreneurship. So my first work was helping them build their brand, design business cards, logos, branding, websites, emails. And that's essentially how I got started. I taught myself code, taught myself design, Adobe tools, and then I got an internship at a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and then 5 years in fintech, and the rest has been history. This career has taken me all over the world. Started out mostly on the research side, and then I moved into design after.
And you mentioned it's taken you all over the world. So you want to talk a little bit about that? I know you've had a really interesting journey in terms of where you live and how you've got around.
Yeah, so I spent good part of my childhood moving around, like my dad's military. So like spent the summers away and then did the school year in the US. And then when I went to college, I got a consulting job. So I was traveling for work, research abroad internationally, and then bringing it back to San Francisco. But then I got a job at booking.com in Amsterdam. And that's when it got really, let's say, intense because I actually fully moved to Amsterdam for several years. Then I was doing work in Australia, and I moved to Lisbon, and now it's been 3 years in Barcelona.
I know you do a lot with research, and it sounds like that's been a core part of your story. Where did the passion or interest in research come from?
Yeah, I got into UX because of neuroscience. Like my actually first job was at a company, like a nonprofit or association called the Society for Neuroscience. So I actually worked with neuroscientists, built tools for them, built tools for students who were going to become neuroscientists. And the Nobel Prize for like chemistry and neuroscience, I worked on both of those kind of submission softwares. And so it was like we had to do research with researchers. It's probably the most closest I've ever gotten to a clinical researcher because we actually worked with scientists, and it's a very interesting thing to do research with people who specialize in research. It's like working at Figma and doing research with designers, right? It's like your design tool maker for designers. So I got really good at like deep user research skills, mixed method technology, and I think that built a very strong foundation for loving data, loving qual, loving customer service, feedback, app store reviews, just gathering as much feedback as possible. My core is still a designer, but I'm just a very like input, feedback loop influenced designer.
Nice. And you have had a successful career. You've been at some very cool brands. Can you talk a little bit about how that path came together?
Yeah, some of the cool brands, like I think there's the ones people find cool in tech, and then there's the ones I find really cool. So I've worked at big companies in tech like Glovo, which is similar to Uber Eats or DoorDash, but in Europe. I've worked at booking.com, which is like the world leader in hospitality. But I've also worked at Gap, which was like a really fun foray into like retail tech and like in-store, in-person, logistics management, retail stocking, all of that. I worked at JP Morgan Chase, the biggest bank, and then Capital One before that.
A nice range.
Been back and forth between like really big companies and then really small startups. When I left Chase Bank, for example, I went to a company where I was the third employee, and then I was there until they were 60 or 70. And then I went back to big because I wanted stability and I wanted less stress. I wanted role definition and not have to wear 10 hats. And then I get annoyed with things moving slow. And then I go back to startups where things move fast. And I think I found the medium point of a scale up company, like a 300, 400 person startup is my happiest place. And so that's what I'm doing mostly now.
So what were some of your big takeaways in terms of how design and research work at large companies, say a Chase or Booking, comparatively to a smaller startup type of company?
Yeah, good question. I think honestly, the way things worked at the larger companies were a lot more, let's say, thorough. You have to do a lot of influence with stakeholders to get buy-in, to get support. You have to fight the battle of distributing knowledge. So repositories are super important, trying to resolve redundancies and build what Spotify did with like tribes. So find different areas, different teams in the business that have the same KPI, the same core user problem or job to be done or tasks, and kind of conduct research and experiments together so that you see both the B2B side and the B2C side and the impact on sales and the impact on customer service instead of having these four things be silos. So I think the big companies, it was a lot of collaboration is key, having really close context to where the business spends money and trying to make sure that your research isn't just beneficial to the product, but beneficial to all the departments that enable the product, that sell the product, that service the product. So there's a lot of ecosystem development and management, a lot of stakeholder buy-in, and distinctly different than small companies. Like you had to prove yourself. So if you wanted to do a research trip, they came far and few between. The smaller companies were a lot more interested in going to booths and conferences and meeting people in person, and their sales were a lot more hands-on, whereas big companies wanted to scale a smaller team, but more impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking about the booths and the conferences, you do a great job with personal branding and thought leadership. Can you talk a little bit about what got you into that and how that journey for you came to be?
Yeah, I love it. There's no other way around it. I think it's my calling that I ignored for a very long time. I think I was always like a theater kid, not like heavy into theater, but like every time that it would come up, I knew I liked it, but then I was like, this isn't a job. I'm going to go work in tech. And I think there was a pivotal point that I got asked to do like a leadership training at a company because I was a manager. And then in that role, I like didn't agree with any of the L&D, like running development teams, like exercises and workshops, and they were all super old. And I took this thing called like the Gallup Strengths Finder, and it very clearly like prioritized and listed what my key strengths were. And three of my top strengths I wasn't utilizing in the job at all. So I started to write about it. I think I started to do Medium articles and I started to do like informal mentorship within the company, people who wanted to become managers. And then someone said, hey, you should come speak at this conference. And then that turned into someone saying, you should come lecture at my university. And this was at Georgetown in the US. And I loved it. And so I wanted to become a professor. Then I found out teachers don't get paid enough. So I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it without losing money. I actually need to do this and keep my day job. So that means maybe it makes more sense to do podcasts, wink, wink, or conferences or keynote speeches. And that's what I do now.
And you've excelled in the speaking space. How did that piece of it go from, say, the first time you got up there to deliver a talk to where you are today? And I know there's a lot that goes into that, from just one, nerves and just feeling good and confident, comfortable getting up there and telling a story, delivering a message, to two, coming up with content that will be engaging and just resonate with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, content-wise, it's completely, people don't believe it. It's very sporadic. I just constantly make myself make new content. I have no problems or qualms with people who know that the audience for different events are different and then retell the story because they know the audience doesn't overlap. I think that's honestly, it's easier. It also allows you to refine your content more and more. But for me, I live off of the adrenaline rush of, hey, I have a conference in Germany in 2 weeks. Let's do like this year's version of that same content. So throw away all the examples, brand new tools, brand new anecdotes. And if I notice that the conference attracts a different audience, I completely change the topic. So I'll talk about stakeholder in Vancouver, and then I'll talk about why European tech companies take less risks in Europe, because it's a different topic that's higher priority. And honestly, it's a different audience. And I just feel like I'd rather tailor the content to each of the unique audiences that each conference attracts versus just giving my one topic in 10 different events.
What advice would you have for someone who is interested in getting into speaking and wants to speak? I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I would love to do it. I'm really interested in doing it. I'm just nervous to get up there.
So I actually started to teach last year a class on public speaking. And this is very funny because it's one of those things where I'm good at it, but I didn't think I would be good at teaching it. 'Cause to me, it's half natural, half adrenaline rush. You need to figure out your personal preferences with preparation. There's three topics I have. It's like preparation, presentation, and persuasion. Preparation wise, I don't like being overly prepared. Like, I'm not a person who rehearses speeches or like paces in my room and thinks about every word, because if I do that, I will be bad, because I will try to be perfect when I go and deliver, and I will be mad at myself on stage real time that I missed a word that I rehearsed. I prefer to come up with something on the fly. So there is no other version. There is no perfect version. The version that comes out is the version that it's supposed to be. With presentation, I'm more visual, so I do very low word count per slide. I kind of go very fast. I probably go with 1.5 slides per minute. So I prefer people kind of getting a story, seeing images, visual examples, videos, rather than reading long texts or frameworks. And then for the last one, persuasion wise, I'm much more of a person that prefers to show people, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I would do differently. This is what I would do going forward. So I don't really like the talks that are like pony shows for the company you work for. These are our features. We're hiring people. We're amazing. I'd rather come and talk about, hey, we fucked up doing this. These are the lessons we learned. This is what I would do differently. This is what we're trying going forward. What are you all trying? And I'm very big on audience interaction. And I think the dialogue, the two-way engagement is a lot more persuasive.
And I love that with the storytelling and being vulnerable and opening up and admitting to where things didn't work out and talking about how maybe the situations were corrected along the way or what you learned. I think that's cool. And I really love and appreciate what you said about preparation, where in your mind, if you think you're going to go in there and not say exactly what you had rehearsed, you're going to feel that, but just letting it come out natural is super interesting.
Yeah. So that's my style.
Awesome. What are some key lessons you've learned throughout your career?
I mentioned before, working at really big companies and really small companies, one of the bigger things at bigger companies is the influence of stakeholders and really trying to learn each person. And this is super important at all stage companies. So collaboration is key. One of the things I started to do is make like micro pseudo personas of my stakeholders. So I like archetype people when I'm like interviewing, because you don't know them very well. But once you're actually working on a team, like, you know your boss, right? There's like the way he prefers information, the brevity he prefers for updates, whether he prefers to be brought in early or delegates to you and gets brought in late. And I kind of archetype and make personas out of all my stakeholders, like the head of engineering, the head of sales, customer service, the account managers. And so this is something that I just do because it allows me to like really document the behavior preferences and then also teach this to my team. And then everyone knows the ways of working of these people who are key stakeholders. The second thing I do is I kind of document all the business contexts. So like, how do we make money? How do we lose money? What do the shareholders care about? Like, what pisses off the investors? What makes them happy? What earns us trust? What loses trust? And I think that's something that when it's documented is so much easier to monitor than to just memorize.
Personas of stakeholders, I really like that. Do the stakeholders know that they're a persona?
I started talking about this maybe 2 years ago, and the company I was working at the time, the CTO was like, hey, are you doing this at our company? And I was like, of course, it worked so far in my career, so I'm going to keep doing it. It actually was funny because the first time I'd ever seen someone else do it, it included me. And they were leaving the company and they handed over their personas because I was taking over one of their teams. And it had a persona for each designer, each researcher, and then it included me because I was one of their stakeholders. And it was funny to see someone use it on me and like how they described me: tech savviness, preference for brevity or depth of information, all the different factors they chose.
So what are some of the bigger challenges you faced in your career and how did you overcome these challenges?
There've been a lot of situations I wasn't prepared for. That's one of the reasons why I do leadership training now, is because I never got it. Like, I think some of the really big companies used to historically invest a lot in their people, and like L&D used to be like a whole department separate than HR oftentimes. And now everything's under people. And I think L&D is like a task versus like a department or a big team. And so companies are making people managers because the team grew, or because they were there longer, or because they asked or they want to be or aspire to be. But like, aspiration, motivation does not make skill, right? So just because someone wants to be, is willing to be, exists, doesn't mean that they are the best manager. And I think a lot of people need to go through that transition and be trained before they're being judged and performance reviewed for those skills. So my biggest challenges have been like I went from managing a team of 5 or 6 to 24. Like my job night and day changed from 5 to 24. Then my team went from 24 to 45 due to a bunch of layoffs and me being the most senior leader left. And then after booking, I went to a small company, took a break, had 6 people. And then I went to Glovo and my team was 60. And so it was even double my last big team. And during my 2 years there, it went from 60 to 105. And so it was just, I had never grown a team that much, that quickly. I had never hired this many managers. I interviewed over 100 people in 2 years just to hire 40 of them. And it was insane. And so learning on the job, finding personal time to invest in getting a coach, paying for my own training, paying for my own mentorship, and then really trial and erroring with people's careers is what is super common for managers and leaders, which is super unfortunate. It's the biggest challenge I've ever faced is coming across new management challenges and having no one to look up to, having a boss who doesn't work in the field when you report to CPOs, CTOs, things like this.
And it sounds like you looked for outside help.
Yeah, I had to.
What would you say your biggest learning was from going from a team of 6, say, to a team of over 100? And it sounds like it happened relatively quickly.
Yeah, super quickly. I think my management total number of years is like 5 or 6, but I think more than half of that was small teams. And so then it's a stark comparison to the last half, which I went from 60 to 105. I'm not a really big person on like titles. So I think some companies have directors, head of, VP, chief design officers. And sometimes the titles has nothing to do with the size. Like I think I managed bigger teams than most chief design officers in Europe because of the team sizes of the European companies are smaller. And it's the funniest thing because like I'll talk to a VP of design and they have 24 people. And I'm like, oh, one of my tribes is 24 people. I have 7 tribes. I have design ops, research ops, design, research, localization, content, all under product design. What do you think I should do? And they have no idea. So I ended up having to go to some of the largest companies where they have 100, 200, 300 people, Meta, Capital One, PayPal, Visa, SumUp. And I think the biggest challenge was getting over the ego and being like, hey, I'm not good at this. Can you help me? Can I share my notes? Can we share resources? Can we share templates? And then going to some people who used to be in management who decided to opt out and be principal designers who had really good frameworks and asking them to share them or teach me.
No, that's great. I love that. Never anything wrong with asking for help and not really knowing. It's something we all go through.
Exactly.
Can you share an instance where a setback or a failure turned out to be a hidden opportunity?
Yeah, super relevant transition question because that team that I grew from 60 to 105, we went through a layoff immediately after. I think the entire company grew too fast and we're overspending. I think the company hired 1,500 people in 12 months. So my team of by 40, the organization grew by tenfold and it was just too much and the company needed to cut back. It was both a setback for everyone involved and impacted and a failure on my part to not call out that we were growing too fast. And it turned into a huge opportunity because I was able to then custom build the organization, did a full restructure. The restructure didn't involve anyone losing their jobs because this was after the layoff. And I was able to really tailor make positions for people. So we did skills mapping for every individual. We rewrote all the level frameworks, the career descriptions, the skills required for promotions. And people really get to choose which team they wanted to be on, which level they wanted to go into, whether they wanted to go into IC as staff, principal, or they wanted to go into management. And it was the first time I had really tailor made an entire organization. And at the time, product design, research, and et cetera, my whole scope was 75% of the headcount of product. So I essentially designed the product department for this company, and it directly influenced the way we hired PMs, the way we hired program managers. So it turned into a huge opportunity for both me and then for everyone at the company to be in a better position and to really understand what was expected of them and their roles.
That's a lot. I can imagine there being countless lessons that you learned through doing that that probably still help you to this day.
Yeah, staying professional in hard times, really starting to fall in love with harsh feedback, and then learning how to maintain relationships even through hard times. Like most people who I laid off in this role, I have good relationships with still. I've hired them for other positions, I've referred them places. So it's been really a big learning moment for me.
And can you recall a moment in your career that significantly influenced your path, and how did that moment change the path that you're on?
Okay, so there's two. There's one that I'll be very short about, which is that Booking.com, working at a travel company during COVID, was massively influential to what I did with my career. I just saw all the numbers, all the KPIs go to zero. The team was like hundreds of people at Booking. It's like one of the most established experimentation companies globally. And I essentially had to manage through layoffs. Our whole team scope changed. I went from like an individual team lead to like in charge of 3 or 4 teams. So that was a big impact, just like learning on the job. And then the second thing I learned was running hackathons to get really cool ideas approved and funded, and leading company wide things like scavenger hunts and team buildings and getting things prioritized across the department. That was good for morale, skills development.
A lot you just said there that I want to ask about the scavenger hunt, though. That sounds super interesting.
Most fun thing I ever did. We just scavenger hunt physically all around Amsterdam with all the like designers, researchers, content writers, everything. And we just turned it into a huge fun activity. But then people got to hang out and meet each other across the department, across engineering, that never hung out, that never spent time together.
I love that you did that. Sounds like it was great team building. And obviously, the more people get to know one another and trust one another, the better the work ultimately becomes. What skills or mindsets have been crucial in navigating twists and turns in your own career?
Two biggest things are like adaptability and resilience are like non-negotiable in this field. Like either we're getting a new tool every couple of years. It's like you can love macro media, then you have to love Adobe, then you need to love Sketch and then Figma, and then maybe Motif or whoever comes out next, Webflow. The ability to influence stakeholders because we will never know where we're going to be. Like when I started out in UX, HCI, it was different names. We reported into engineering, we reported into marketing, and now we report into product. It just keeps changing. I think change is the only constant. And we're a field that both blew up and became its own mature industry, you could say, in 20 years, and it's going to keep changing. We're quite a young, nascent sub industry. And so just really building soft skills for empathy, storytelling, getting close to stakeholders, being able to defend yourself, it's really invaluable.
With hindsight, is there anything you would do differently in your career?
This thing about like embracing failures and talking about them publicly is very new, I would say the last 3 or 4 years. I was always worried people were like looking for my job or going to take my job, or if I show my boss I can't do something, he'll get someone else. And this is because I started my career in the '08 bubble crisis, like when there were no jobs. And I was very lucky to get a UX job, and my other peers in engineering or science or medical were not getting jobs. I remember getting a job as a kid and my mom losing her job in the '08 crisis. And I just thought, oh, is my industry more stable than doctors, than teachers? I was like, this is weird. And then at the same time, I spent a lot of time talking about all the things that I thought were obvious because as researchers, I think every researcher who ever listens to this or anything in tech always feels like they're the canary in the coal mine. They get research, they hear feedback, they go yell about it to people, and they're like, you should go do this, change this, fix this, change the backlog, and no one listens. And so I got stressed out and just moved into design, which I don't think is the best recommendation for everyone, but it was what I needed to do to be able to actually make the research insights actionable. I think it's a really important skill just to learn. It's why I do leadership training. It's why I like do teaching and build an academy to teach these skills independently of your role. Because I think PMs, researchers, designers, program managers, whoever all really need these skills. So I'm super, super excited to take the failures of the past and really reflect and think about what I would do differently and then get feedback on this.
I'm going to ask you another question. This is going to be a two-part question. So I always ask, what do you think the future of design looks like? I would also like to ask you, what do you think the future of research is going to look like? So maybe go after both of those, because I know you're heavily involved with both, so I'd love to hear your take.
I think I spent the last year talking about AI and how tooling is going to have a huge impact. I think there's two big trends. One is there are two contradictory trends happening at the same time. You have a huge adoption of AI, of really mature data management processes coming into companies after years of really messy data management. And then you have this superhuman requirement of being good at figuring out what works for a business. And it's very rarely detected by AI. AI will tell you the trend, AI will tell you the average, AI will tell you the majority, and it will recommend following that majority. It's not really trained, it's not really given enough data on like when to go left when everyone goes right. It doesn't know when to like play it soft in a negotiation versus playing it hard as a bad cop versus good cop. It doesn't have the empathy, it doesn't have the kind of the soft skills. So like the soft skills are becoming really important because AI scaling is dangerous. Because if we all do the same thing, we'll all drive off the cliff together. So I think knowing the AI, knowing how to use AI tools in your space, in your craft, in your industry, super important. Knowing when not to will become equally important. They're contradictory things to both be trending at the same time, but it's really about finding a happy medium, a balance versus living on the extremes.
I want to circle back. So something you have mentioned a few times is leadership training you do. Could you talk a little bit more about what you do and how you got into leadership training?
I think a lot of my talks were about craft, were about features we rolled out and research we did and discoveries and aha moments in the product design development process. And then people started asking me about how did you get approval to do this? Who allowed you to do this crazy idea? Who funded this research? Who let you build this team? And I just found out that it wasn't super common to go into a company for 18 months and have done as much as I was doing. I think people sort of judge my CV a bit because I came from a consulting background. And so I was very used to only being with like a client or a company for 2 years and not waiting till next quarter or waiting till next year, fighting for budget, repurposing it, asking for forgiveness versus permission. And I think some of those skills, plus some of the speaking skills, some of the hiring skills, I thought would be really cool to teach to other people. So there's ADP list. I'm on there. But then I said the boot camp scene is just too low quality. So I would not like to build another boot camp, but I would love to build like a upskill academy. Take people who are already in the field, who have already learned the basic skills, the tools, but they don't know the craft. They don't know how to pitch and represent themselves and do presentations and fight against engineering leaders, like for the good of the customer. And so I started to build this academy called Over 9 to 5, because these are the skills I learned being a freelancer and being a consultant. So Over 9 to 5 is something that I'm building in stealth right now. And then with the creator of Hatch Conference in Berlin, we're leading a 2-day training summit in Lisbon, Barcelona, and Berlin called leadershipateliers.com.
I have seen that pushed around a lot on LinkedIn. Actually, it looks like a great program.
Yeah, this will be the third year, but the second year where it's independent of the conference. So we'll be doing it in more cities every year.
Who have been your most significant mentors or influencers, and what are some key lessons you have learned from those people?
Yeah, I think I have lots of like pseudo mentors where like I just like consume all the things that they write and I follow their stories and I follow their public talks. And two people would be Bazoma St. John, who is the former CMO of Netflix and Apple Music and Uber. She's incredible. She's gone from a massive career in marketing and music, PR to she has her own hair company now, and she's like a global public speaker. And I think she's really inspired me because I don't think that many people go from corporate, diehard corporate people to like fully independent to 5-figure, 6-figure public speakers. It's a very small jump. It's a very big jump, but a very small pool of people who have made that jump. I also have individual craft mentors. I have like a research specialist like Meltem, who is a big coach to me personally here in Barcelona. I have Pamela, who's in Berlin. She's like currently at SumUp. She's previously at Microsoft. Like, I think they're just people who have just been a really like torched a path in the industry that I can see myself taking. Similar is like the CDO at the chief design officer at Capital One. She isn't my mentor, but I follow her and I'm like really inspired by her and I follow a lot of what she teaches and shares.
I read that you found interesting people from different places and follow what they're talking about and doing. I think it's super cool. What are the most important takeaways from your career journey that you think everyone should know?
Three simple things. One is understand the business impact of the work you do. It makes you invaluable to not be able to just execute work, but to be able to explain before the work is done what the impact would be, and to not explain it in terms of customer satisfaction or NPS, but in customer acquisition costs and retention, in lifetime value, in shareholder price, or in market share. So do the end user work the same way we do it for ourselves and for our scope. Think about it for the business. It's not just the immediate effect on the roadmap or the backlog for one PM, one team. Think about it for the department. Think about it for the company. Think about it for the industry. What is the impact of doing this better? Is it more calls? Is it less customer service costs? Is it less complaints? Is it higher NPS, which is usually cheaper marketing, cheaper acquisition? Really paint the full picture, not just the immediate benefit. Two is always keep learning. Industry moves too fast, stand still, embrace new technologies, embrace the changes, at least take a look and learn before you reject and refuse. I really rather have an educated negative opinion rather than just a negative opinion of a shift I see in the market. And then three is relationships really matter. So build them with authenticity and curiosity. It's not transactional. Make sure you give as much as you take.
What advice would you give to someone earlier in their career who is still trying to figure things out?
So this is going to be counterintuitive. I think we're going through a similar time in tech as I was going when I started my career in '08. It's going to be about specialization because people are going to look past people who are generalists, people who are new. But if you can afford it, if you're in a space where you have options to work in different companies or a company that has different scopes, different product lines, B2B and B2C, multiple countries, things like this, work there. I say explore widely before you specialize, especially earlier in your career. You're not going to get pigeonholed yet, but you will later. You spend 4 or 5 years or 6 years like I did in fintech, you're going to get pigeonholed as like the bank guy. And I only worked at a tech firm, a bank, another bank. And then I worked at like loyalty at a retail company, which is just financial services, like credit cards and gift cards and loyalty programs. So I fought for a very long time to leave financial services and products. So I say go wide, learn different skills, tools, domains, industries, and then pick the one you like the most. Job hopping used to be really like negative in the industry. I think it's a lot more relevant now to job hop because you're not going to see the same growth in one company. Companies are not super stable right now. The biggest people who have been on the New York Stock Exchange for decades are falling off. Same thing on the Germany DMAX stock exchange. Like small companies are disrupting big companies every single day. If you see a company or a product you believe in, go work for them. Loyalty, I think, matters more to people than it does to employers.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good points there and completely agree with you on going wide early on. Really great advice. Is there any advice you would have for a more seasoned leader?
I think for a more seasoned leader, I think it's like share. I think a lot of people come up to me and they're like, oh my God, I've never heard of you. I saw you at this conference. This is so cool. And I was like, you've worked in this industry longer than me. I would love to have heard of you 3, 4, 5 years ago. I would love to have asked you these questions that I had to learn by myself or ask other people. I think a lot of leaders don't find their medium that they prefer to share things in. I, for a long time, knew I hated writing. I was forcing myself to do these Medium articles, and I was like, this is not my thing. And then Twitter came out, and you could do these little short tweets, but that isn't my thing either. And then I like talking. So like podcasts coming up as a medium that blew up. I love that. I love meetups because you get to talk in like small rooms, and I love conferences. So I was pretty sad when conferences shut down during COVID and did a lot of online talking, online education at universities. And so when COVID ended and I went back to looking at what I was going to do for teaching and sharing knowledge, my immediate thought was, let's go apply to go speak at these big conferences and see what they say. And they said yes. So I think it's really about experimenting with how you want to document your knowledge and share knowledge and just rapidly iterating so that you find your thing.
And we're going to move into some closing questions here. What is your favorite quote?
I have to go with, I'm a big fan of Apple, Steve Jobs. I met Tim Cook once and I have a photo of it and I've cherished it for a very long time. So I have to go with this quote. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. And it's a quote from Steve Jobs. It parallels quite well with Nielsen Norman Group. Don Norman talks about UX isn't just the interface or how it feels. UX is everything, right? I think it's about capturing the essence of balancing form and function.
Great. And there is a lot of good content out there. What are you looking at now? And what would you recommend to listeners?
I always go back to a classic, the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Really big fan. I'm also super big on the AI space, but AI from like a holistic lens. There's a woman who I used to work with who's a very good friend of mine, Emily Campbell. She runs the website, The Shape of AI. Super great. She's like a UX expert, but also went to university and was taught economics. So she comes at it from like a not just policy, but also outcome impact perspective. I also follow lots of leaders on LinkedIn, and I subscribe directly to some people's Substack. On YouTube, I also follow podcasts, but particularly I like Jennifer Blatz. I like Meredith Black, who runs Design Ops. I like Holly Burrows Cole, David Klein, Vitaly Friedman from Smashing Magazine, and then David Hoang, who is the head of AI for Atlassian.
Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's where I'm probably the most active and easy to reach. I'm on ADP list if you want to grab some time for a conversation, for a mentorship. And then, of course, with the slow demise of Twitter/X, I'm on both Instagram owned Threads, and I'm also on Blue Sky.
Kevin, this was great. I really appreciate your time today. I think there was a lot of really great stuff here, and I'm super excited to get this episode released.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to reflect. These are really good questions on your part. So I had a fun time.
That's it for today's episode. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment with your thoughts, like this episode if it resonated with you, and share it with someone who might benefit. And don't forget to follow so you never miss an episode. Thanks for being part of this journey with us. Until next time.